This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. I hope everyone's having a happy holiday. And what I'm looking at today is 2021's The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn. And speaking of which, David Ayer's 2016 Suicide Squad tends to get a lot of criticism. And that's very interesting because it's one of the few movies people despise without having seen. By which I mean, if you've seen David Ayer's movie, you have not seen David Ayer's movie. The story revolving around David Ayer's movie is almost legend at this point. In any case, it was edited by a trailer cutting company, and it certainly looks the part. It's not a well-assembled movie. It's repetitive. Despite a reliance on flashy color, it's very much kind of boring. But as I said, that's not David Ayer's fault. And in fact, as opposed to the Snyder Cut nonsense, which, let's be honest, it kind of was, the Ayer cut, I thought, had actual validity. Because, as I said, what you saw when you watched Suicide Squad was not what David Ayer intended. It's a pity, which brings us to 2021's The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn. And in most instances I've heard this movie reviewed, they really praised it. Having seen it, I'm kind of wondering why. Because it's not a very good movie. And this is why. As I've said before, James Gunn as a director is really interesting when you rein him in. You don't give him full rein and give him supervision. He tends to do really well, such as the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, for instance. If you give him a big budget and let him do whatever he wants, his worst instincts tend to come out. And that's what happened with The Suicide Squad. It is excessively gory, and it has no reason to be that gory. Now keep in mind something. I love horror movies. In fact, I recently saw Terrifier and thought it was hilarious. Gore does not bother me. Gore that doesn't belong does. And there's no reason why The Suicide Squad should be as gory as it happens to be. And if you recall, Gunn's movie was a flop in theaters. Now keep in mind, the movie was also caught up in that whole debacle of sending Warner Brothers movies to streaming that I think his name was Jason Killer was doing for a time. I thought it was a stupid policy then, I think it's a stupid policy now. But in any case, it was caught up in that mix. But still, it doesn't change the fact that this movie does not need to be as violent as it is. And the thing is, as I said, I don't mind violence and gore. I do mind bad taste. And there's quite a bit about the way the violence is executed in The Suicide Squad. Another issue is that it seems to have the same aesthetic as Zack Snyder's films, which is not a surprise because he is actually an executive producer on this movie, along with Deborah Snyder, his wife, and Walter Hamada. And it's like the worst of all possible worlds coming together. James Gunn tries to infuse this movie with heart, but some of the characters are so reprehensible that it just falls on deaf ears. It's extremely well acted. Idris Elba is great. The wrestler who plays Peacekeeper is also interesting. It is David Dalmatian, by the way, is really, really good, as he typically is. It's a well-acted, well-shot movie, but it's also not a very good movie because it's at war with itself. Its violence seems excessive. It seems kind of mean-spirited, and it's just not necessary for this type of movie. I actually sat through The Suicide Squad twice because, to be honest with you, the first time it just wasn't clicking for me, so I watched it again and did my damnedest to pay attention. And so I have a better grasp of what it's all about. And it's just not saying very much. This is part of why the DCEU is doing so badly. And ironically enough, the 2016 movie did really well, despite being, for reasons you already are aware of, pretty bad. The 2021 movie is narratively better. It flows better. It's more engaging in its own way. But it's also more cynical. It's also needlessly violent. And it's just not interesting. And it's a pity because, as I implied, the DCEU in people's minds is losing credibility. This movie, The Suicide Squad, was the final nail in the coffin. And I can see why James Gunn and Peter Safran have decided to reboot it entirely. And I don't see anyone wanting it as representative of their cinematic universe. But that being said, it's really odd to me that James Gunn took a rather significant role in its downfall. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace. And happy holidays.